How did consciousness evolve? That may depend on what kind of consciousness you mean. For different people, consciousness may feel different, and they'll want different explanations. Some examples? How about people who spend their whole professional lives telling us we're wrong, that we should experience it the way they do? Philosophers. Try reading Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus by Ludwig Wittgenstein, or Process and Reality by A.N. Whitehead. As you read, you can feel their pain at realizing how they experience the world makes no sense to anyone else. I'll give you some text coming from a different consciousness shortly, but first, how some common types of conscious experiences that I'll call mentalities correspond to different theories of how they evolved. I'm matching up mentalities with theories of consciousness and evolution of consciousness. Here we go. Mentality 1, aphantasia. Most of us can bring images to mind. We have mind's eye. Some people are hyperphants, for whom imagined images can be as vivid as vision itself. But some are aphants. They can't form mental images at all. Instead of storing visual experience as mental images, they seem to store them as something like data on a spreadsheet. They can report accurately on what they've seen, but they can't turn it back into mind's eye images. Because they can't turn visual descriptions into images, they're left cold by written descriptions of landscapes or of something scary. Their theory of evolution. If I experience this flattening of experience, I'd probably experience myself as something robotic. But at the same time, I would probably experience being able, through conscious choices, to establish new habits. So I'd probably opt for Lamarckism. If I experience no visual imagery at all, but vivid dreams, as some aphants report, I'd probably be a Mysterian. On the other hand, as a hyperphant, able to summon up visual images at will, along with the frequently accompanying synesthesia, I might vote for solipsism and an idealist mechanism of evolution. Got the idea? How evolution works for us will correspond to what we want evolution to account for, what kind of consciousness we experience. Let's try another. Mentality 2. Contradictory realities. What you're conscious of conflicts with how your body responds. Which will you trust? If you trust your body's behavior more, then you're likely to distrust consciousness. With a mild case, you'd probably simply dismiss conscious experiences as a distracting illusion. That would make me an illusionist. But as for evolution, I'd be confused. How could creatures with such wonky minds evolve at all? I suspect an extreme case of this was Ludwig Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. I couldn't make any sense of it. In later life, reconciled to how differently consciousness related to reality and other people, he spoke of reality as a game for which different people chose different rules. I suppose he'd have thought of evolution as a lottery. Okay, mentality 3, internal narrative. You experience internal voices narrating conscious experience. Extremes vary from a complete absence of internal chat to a voice that never stops. Some people experience multiple voices, but more common, I think, is experiencing the voice as one's own, of having a conscious self that persists largely unchanged from one experience one day to the next. How could such a persistent self evolve? I don't know, but Samuel Butler, in Life and Habit, tried to account for personality persisting over generations. Perhaps for a corresponding theory of evolution, you would start there. Mentality 4, personification of everything, of actors and objects, oneself, other people, parts of the physical world. You see them as persons like you and endow them with free will. Evolutionary theory: if I experienced everything as having agency, even down to the atom, I'd probably reason my way to becoming a panpsychist. Then my mechanism of evolution would probably have life emerging from matter through successive stages of self-organization. Is this making sense? I'm really talking about theories of evolution having a logic deriving from what it is we most care about having expressed, our experience, okay? Mentality 5, partial consciousness. How much of your mind does your consciousness have access to? Some people are conscious only of cognition, sense impressions coming in and their behaviors going out. They're not aware of anything in between. Their mind's working. It seems to operate behind a curtain. What's going on back there, they can know about only by what they observe themselves doing, or by speaking or writing. I come across examples of this on YouTube. If that was my experience, everything would appear to be physical, so I'd be a physicalist. For evolution, I'd settle on a purely physical theory, such as Darwin's. Mentality 6, inside-out mentality. A vision of this become more common in my lifetime is people feeling they have no central control over their mental faculties. In the movie Inside Out, a young girl experiences being entirely controlled by competing mental modules: joy, sadness, fear, disgust, and anger. One critic exulted that, finally, how we actually experience consciousness was being publicly acknowledged. Evolution? They probably wouldn't care. Darwinism would probably do fine. Mentality 7, epiphenomenalism. Until I was 29, I experienced complete freedom in what I could think, but I experienced my body as entirely determined by physical law. My conscious thinking had no influence over what I did. In effect, this was similar to physicalism. I felt well served by Darwinism. Later, I realized consciousness could influence how we evolved. I became a Darwin skeptic. The revelation was really realizing that even if my body didn't behave to express my conscious desires, it could speak about them. So it had access to them. So there was no barrier against it performing them. Now for an exercise. Michael Graziano is a neuroscientist at Princeton University. As far as consciousness goes, he admits to being a physicalist, so he won't experience it the way most of the rest of us do. But he wants to meet us halfway, so he's created a model of how he thinks we think. It's how he thinks subjective consciousness works. He calls it the attention schema theory. Here are some extracts from the book Consciousness and the Social Brain he published in 2015. Can you identify with this account of consciousness? Awareness is a description of attention. I use the word in a neuroscientific sense. I am referring to a mechanistic process in the brain. According to the theory, the statement X is conscious means a brain or other computational device constructed an informational model of consciousness and attributed it to X. If brains attribute consciousness to X, then X is conscious in the only way that anything is conscious. The universe has consciousness type B. That consciousness is an informational model constructed in the brains of many, though not all people, and attributed to the collection of all events that are otherwise inexplicable. The cosmos is conscious in much the same way that anything is. Its consciousness is made of the same stuff as our own consciousness, information instantiated in the hardware of the brain. It is conscious because brains attribute consciousness to it, and that is the only way that anything is ever conscious. Awareness is an informational model, a description, a picture, but the depiction directly alters the thing that it depicts. It has the capacity to shape the processing in the brain and control behavior. A tree can be conscious. A hunk of rock can be conscious. They can all be conscious in more or less the same sense that a human is conscious. The reason is that, according to the attention schema theory, human consciousness is not something a person has. It is an attribution. I believe that most scholars have a deep-seated bias in the way they think about consciousness. The bias is persuasive and subtle. In it, awareness and information are distinct from each other. By contrast, I think logically, awareness is information. I am suggesting that awareness is indeed a chunk of information constructed in the brain. The heart of the theory is that awareness is a schematized, descriptive model of attention. How can we become aware of any information at all? What is added to produce awareness? I will argue that the added ingredient is itself information. How did you do? Did you recognize yourself? If not, you can always play it again until you get it. Why this matters? In today's school science classroom, only one account of evolution may be taught, an updated version of Charles Darwin's original theory, a purely physical process that makes no allowance for the operation of mind. Why is that? Who says so? Who decides which theory of evolution we should all be taught? From compiling my list, I concluded that today's origin story, with its purely physical mechanism, corresponds to consciousness as experienced by physicalists. Yet this corresponds to how only a minority among us experience what's real. Could a purely physical origin story, like what's taught in school today, be confusing for children with different cognitive styles? Should we supplement the physicalist origin story with a story accounting for reality as the rest of us experience it? I'm not talking about intelligent design. I'm talking about a theory of consciousness that recognizes mind.